You said you were with Waldeboro before?
Yeah, I was the town manager when they did that. Huh?
What were they doing
They
down
had that Connect Main project, where they put those towers up, in 5 or 6 places.
Yeah.
Bob Butler, John, I can't even think of his name.
Oh,
John,
what's it, John Lawrence?
yep, John Lawrence. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I know.
I'll leave it at that.
Was detail oriented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jason Philbrook.
Yes, I know Jason.
Yeah.
He's with, is he still with them? I don't know.
So he was in coach.
Did he move over to GWI?
Yes, he did. Yes,
Okay.
he did. Over to GWI, yeah.
One.
He was my main
So I'm gonna
contact.
watch her show.
Mid-coast or whatever it was.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And
that.
GWI.
And all I have to do is click on it.
Stuff. You're such a
Yeah.
Good guy.
So I don't,
So
do I need this?
I probably not. And then.
John did. I think that was a question. John did. I think that was a question. Hi. I think that was a question of 2 experts. You know.
You said 10 minutes out the parking.
I know, and then I got stuck behind a tractor for about 20.
No, I'm going back from it.
Okay, you won't be blind.
Yes.
It's so-
Oh, you haven't that.
No.
Which works best for you? Hey, pricing.
Um,
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I think everybody can sit around the table would be the coziest way to do this.
well,
We have an assortment of chairs here.
Thank you, Penny. I'll drop it off at the library.
And I believe we're gonna have 2 people by Zoom and gonna come.
I'm not stealing somebody's area, am I?
No.
If I would, I can't see if someone's trying to come in.
Can't tell on that machine, I think.
I'm not. Someone is? Oh, yep, you got better eyes than I do.
Don't ask me, 'cause I can barely see the computer.
Well, I've been doing a lot of Zooming and I recognize the little screens. He's in the waiting room.
I have Kristen in the picture. And? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we haven't started yet. We're trying to get the logistics.
Okay.
We're expecting Ann, or at least we thought we were, and we're expecting Cliff by Zoom.
Okay. Thanks very much. Sorry that I can't be there in person. We have company here, back here in Massachusetts, so sorry about that.
And so what's the little icon we're looking for?
It's right at the top. It's a long strip and it's got a little blue button on it. And somebody's in the waiting room.
So it's not there right now.
Do you guys ever hook up this TV to do that?
That's exactly what we've been talking about. We're working on
I
it.
was
Looking pretty easy.
I was looking at it this morning. It's got different cables than I have to my laptop.
You know what you need is just a Chromecast could work.
And
That just mirrors whatever is on the little screen.
this thing looked like it could go, but I didn't have my laptop here this morning to play with it.
Well, that's what I was wondering, why you can't, like on Netflix, you just plug in the computer and plug it into the TV and it plays on both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand why we can't, in the interim, we can't just do that, but I'm the least techie of anyone at this table, so. We always tend to look for the most complicated,
We just need
expensive
to know what
solution.
to- Yeah, to look it up.
And, like,
Well, that,
Mhm.
so if that takes 8 to 5, and you can just do direct to it,
Yeah, a lot of computers have HDMI plugs on them.
unless they're Apple Macs. Macs, and then you've got
is that, what's that?
Yeah, it does have one.
Well, so we just need a
So
cable,
you need
a long enough cable. I'll go buy us a cable. I was thinking that.
it might be there. There was a cable there, I just don't remember how long.
See, I was thinking it had to be more complicated, or somebody would have clearly figured that out ahead of time.
What's the last time, is we used that,
Well, there's this cable, but it's not very long.
yeah, Brian uses it too.
But you can get extensions.
I'm late. Where am I supposed to
Come
go?
on, come on up.
Come on, join the
Why don't
party.
you pull a chair up in the middle here?
Okay, so Cliff is at clinic tonight.
But it isn't.
No.
Okay, he said he was gonna come in, but
Yeah, right in the middle again.
he said he was gonna come in by phone, but no, he's not.
Well, I don't know if it's going by phone or not. Yeah, well, it said, we weren't having a meeting. And I said, yes, we are. So I don't know what to tell you.
He needs a calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ann, that was you that was in that accident?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God you're okay.
Everybody walked out. And looked hard.
You said Ann just St. George, so I thought it wasn't you.
So a little tiny piece of our property is in St. George. I'm also not 32 years old. There were some other interesting.
You're not?
If it's printed in the newspaper, it's true.
It's true.
It's true, and we've only been married 47 years, so it sort of boggles the mind.
I can't help but ask one more question. If your place is on Hayden Point Road, how is it in St. George?
Patent Point.
Oh, Patton Point.
Those
I'm
patents are-
sorry. Got it. Now that makes more sense.
No, 14 patents, right across from where Louise Kennedy is.
Yeah, so lots of people on Patton Point Road don't know where they live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Often, I
So, and
patient.
the sheriff doesn't know where he is either.
Okay.
Window outside the box, he goes like,
That's all right. I
All right.
have noise in my phone.
Why don't we call this meeting to order at 4:05? Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move along. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? And seeing no public, sorry,
Sorry, John.
no, you,
I had asked about the password. that's
oh,
all.
okay. So, seeing no, public, I assume there'll be no comments. Discuss broadband planning considerations for the town. So I guess we're gonna, just a little bit of background, the thought here is we're gonna do this in two segments. We're gonna talk in an open session and then perhaps go into, or most likely go into executive session, but we won't know that until, obviously, until we vote. So I'll open the discussion. Do you guys want to start with a presentation, or how do you want to?
Yeah, and actually, the order of those is kind of up for grabs too. You want to start with the public discussion? section of things?
I thought that's what your suggested
Yeah,
email said. so
that's fine.
the
And,
way-
and the scope of that to me is really to talk about more generally, what other options have been considered beyond MIDC? What might make sense to look into before we take a leap into MIDC? And that's where Phil comes in to hopefully, kind of steer us in that direction. So I don't think we have a formal presentation by any means, but just want to kind of talk through,
Mhm.
whether there is something beyond joining a regional conglomerate that might work.
I think what would be helpful for me, and I'll link to you two, is if maybe Phil could sort of give us the 20,000 foot view of what's happening sort of statewide. I know we're talking all the federal money possibly, and now I understand the state is taking some of their rescue plan funds and dedicated some of that to broadband and created a public entity, and if you maybe could, that's probably a lot, but if you could.
Well,
Would that be helpful to you guys?
Yes, excellent.
5,000 words or less. You're right. I ran the Connect Main Authority up until 2016. And the Connect Main Authority was the first broadband development agency in the state of Maine, and one of the first in the country. We were using, as you remember, ARA funds, American Recovery Act funds, back in 2006 or 8, something like that. And so when we had that discussion in Waldoboro, it was part of the Connect Main Authority. It was a small operation, limited funds. Last year, the Connect Main Authority got some bonding money, over $10 million worth of bonds. And then now the feds are putting out tens of millions, if not 100, just one of the numbers out there, 128 million. And so the state decided that the current version of the Connect Main Authority wasn't robust enough to handle that kind of funding and possibility of building networks itself. And so they formed the Main Connectivity Authority. It's governor appointed, or governor appointed board members and Senate approved president. I was the executive director, the new person is going to run it now, the president. And so they have just gotten up. They've appointed the people, they've advertised for the president. I was at a Connect Maine board meeting last week, and they are going to continue to go forward with the money that they have until such time as the Connectivity Authority subsumes, in effect, the Connect Maine Authority. So the Connect Maine Authority is they're going to delay their next grant round until November, just because of the uncertainty of what's going on. I wrote that down somewhere, yes. Early September is the next meeting, and then they're gonna decide, because they're not having an August meeting because it's summer. So the next grant round is gonna be in November, and I would suspect that that's going to be both planning and infrastructure grants. The planning grants are critical to a new operation. Talking to another group last week, and they had already gotten their planning grant, and they did the planning study, a pretty extensive study about how and where and what to do with the money in order to build out infrastructure. They're probably going to put out a bid for somebody to do the infrastructure. It's a little bit, what the MIDC is contemplating is a publicly owned infrastructure with an operator and a private operator, so that the town or the corporation owns the infrastructure, and then they contract out with an operator to run it, service it, set up the customers, bill the customers. The Down East Broadband does that, and they're a group of towns, and they've got a company called Pioneer Broadband who's doing the operation side of it.
Where was that?
Down East Broadband, it's I can tell you the town.
Oh, that's okay. I
Yeah,
suppose I got it.
Down East.
Like Baileyville. or something.
Yeah.
Franchise?
It's further down.
Yeah, I think it is.
That's fine. I mean, I'm sure it's got a web presence.
Yes, they do. In fact, I can do that.
Alice, Baileyville, and Alexander.
Yeah, Alexander, in fact, just joined. Down East Broadband, their website is all one word, downeastbroadband.com. The other one that's the other regional broadband utility is Katahdin Region Broadband Utility. And their operator is a company called Axiom. Axiom's out of Trias. And so there's a lot of, the whole public-private model, public-private partnership model is not very prevalent in Maine yet. It's banding together seems like a logical thing to do, but a lot of the other projects that I did with Connect Maine Authority were all standalone. The town applied for an infrastructure grant, or they partnered with an ISP who applied for an infrastructure grant, and they built out. Tidewater, Lincolnville was in the Lincolnville area, and just all there's like 30 or 40 of them. So again, high level look at this. There's just a lot more emphasis on broadband, a lot more emphasis, especially I think, one of the spin-off benefits of COVID is that everybody realized they've got to have decent bandwidth at home in order to work at home, to do healthcare from home, to do economic development. And large bandwidth means, you want large bandwidth down, but you also want large bandwidth up, because that means you can produce at home. Big bandwidth down. The typical model for a cable company, and let me know if I'm rambling on here. Typical model for a cable company is large bandwidth down, small bandwidth up. That's a good consumer model, but it's not a good producer model. So if you wanted somebody at home to write books, market them over the internet, or market engineering plans over the internet, market photography over the internet, they need big bandwidth. Or just Zoom.
Yeah, it clicks out here all the time.
And so that's the advantage of having fiber system. There's a cliche out there, it's future. Of course, when they first invented fiber, that's the word they use. But there's a certain truth to that, because fiber is just that, it's glass fibers in the ground. Capability is determined by the electronics of either end. And those electronics have been improving year by year, where fiber 15 years ago, you get 20 or 30 megs, and then you get 20 or 30 gigs out of it. And it's just huge bandwidth. But having a project that does fiber is a better, longer term process. How you get to it, whether you want to have a South Thomaston network or a MIDC network, I think that's for you and probably your legal advice to figure out. There's pluses and minuses about all of that. And in fact, even the MIDC, they say they would prefer an open network. I could see down the road that somebody could come to them and say, we'll build it, we'll run it, we'll operate it, and it'll be ours. That's not a bad model. The open network model is a good model, but it just depends on what, who steps up.
You just bought an open network.
An open network means that an entity, the town, the corporation, owns the fiber. In effect, it's dark fiber. So they contract with 5 or 10 or however many ISPs to put their own electronics on their fiber, and they can simultaneously use that fiber so that they can provide, so a customer could have choices of 2 or 3 providers for their internet service. And with the capabilities of fiber, that's an easy thing. I was looking at, there's a web group out there called uninetworks.org, and they track all this stuff. And they're tracking about 30 nationwide open networks. And a lot of them are out west, but I looked down through the list of the networks, and some of them have 5 ISPs using it, some of them have 30 ISPs that are using it, which means that the customer has greater choice. So it's a very interesting idea, just not too prevalent out here. And even the down east broadband utilities say theirs is an open network, but they've only got one provider. And the same with Catalan has. They say it's an open network, but they currently have only one provider. And I mean, that's not those 2 providers are very good, are very competitive.
Right.
One Pioneer Broadband, and the other one is Axiom.
Oh, okay, all right, I was confused. When you said provider, I'm thinking ISP.
Terms interchangeable. Terminology in broadband, do you want broadband or do you want internet? Well, yes, because it means the same thing. And then even the term broadband isn't defined. The FCC defines it one way, the Connect Main Authority used to define it a different way. Broadband typically means something that's always on and is large bandwidth. How large is? So that's my little dissertation.
Questions or? Go ahead. Oh, what you?
No, I was thinking about something, but I actually know
Okay.
the answer, so never
All right.
mind.
Walter, Jeff?
So which of these current models is the most successful? And I guess I'll define successful as most advantageous to the end user and least overhead and involvement by the municipality.
Oh, without having done studies, I would say for instance, the towns that partnered with a utility or an ISP, the ISP does all the work, the ISP gets the money, the town has very little involvement. I can see on this open network with the corporation that owns the infrastructure, the dark fiber funded through grants or whatever, and the operation is done by a provider that probably also has low overhead for the city. Successful wise, for a lot of the projects I did, they covered as a requirement of their grant that they received. They received more points in scoring of the grant, the higher percentage of the area that they were to serve, they were going to cover. I mean, certainly some of the grants were 40 or 50% of the town because down long roads or down points or inlets and things like that were a bit more expensive. But I can see, for instance, this down east project, DBU now services 95% of residents in the town of Callis and Baileyville with fiber to the home. Down about there, just voted on. 95%, that's a pretty darn good number. I mean, that's, and fiber to the home. Fiber to the home or fiber to the premise. So it's either FTTP or FTTH. And a lot of the projects I did earlier, they were in the 70 to 80% range of covering everybody that they could reach. I mean, there's a point of if you've got a mile-long driveway and you live down a point, you're going to have to. And there was people in some of those projects they did. They said, okay, I've got buried cable going from the road to my house. I'll just pull a chunk of fiber through it, or even a chunk of coax through it, and the ISP stops at the road and it serves the house. The ways of getting around those high costs. I don't think I answered your question very good because I think my answer was both.
Well, my understanding is the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation, their goal is to provide fiber. They say so much in every home in the service area. Whether it's 6 miles down that dirt road or not, but I mean, they have said that, right?
But initially, right, what they call it, they pivoted. They have,
I'm talking about when they. Yes. You're talking, would you describe what they?
yeah, they originally they said our objective is to provide 100% coverage, and they wouldn't say fiber. They kept saying broadband, high-speed broadband. But then they indicated that they have since pivoted because of the threat from an outside entity that's coming to try to make them go away. So now they are concentrating on high density areas. So the Rocklands and the Camdens become more which it's coincidental that those are the originating towns. So they become more attractive and would get more out of this than those towns that have limited coverage to the down points.
So
But that
you mean the goal being to make it not an attractive proposition for a competitor to come in because the dense user base has been taken up by the newly built out fiber?
Correct.
But I'm not sure the end goal changed. What I heard was the timing of how they first were gonna reach out to the least dense areas.
Right.
Now they're gonna reach out to the most dense areas first, and then come back, if you come back around, if you will, to the least dense areas, which, that's what I heard. But
Well, I think, yeah, my interpretation is that Otelco has put them on the defensive. Now that they have to protect the high density areas from Otelco coming in and then forcing MIDC to come here, basically. And because we'd be the only, not just us, but and us, the underserved. And I don't think those economics are gonna work without Camden or Rockport, if that competitor goes. And we'll probably do that with the time-honored tactic of offering the consumer, making an offer that they can't refuse. They'll have pricing power and infrastructure building capability.
And Rockland hasn't actually, to my knowledge, hasn't actually joined yet. Thomaston, the selectmen voted to join. I don't know if they've been approved yet, because now you've got to be approved. Any third town in has to be approved by the first two towns, and then the fourth town in has to be approved by the three towns.
And Lynn, do you have more on the that Otelco back and forth?
I don't, I haven't seen any. Lynn, did you?
Yeah, I don't either. Sorry, I don't.
The MIDC folks are in no way in discussions with Otelco about partnering from the start.
Yeah, the impression I got was it's just the
They're
opposite.
poised to be competitors.
Right.
Right.
Why is that?
I think there might be some anxiety about if we take in the big stuff. What will guarantee that the people who really need it will get it?
Wouldn't the contract guarantee that?
I would hope so.
Forgive me for being so lawyerly.
No,
but-
that's correct, but I don't know about in your lawyerly life, but I've seen a lot of times when there's a preliminary big thing, and then it all kind of fizzles out, and the people that were really the object of this.
Yeah,
Contract, I assume you mean the interlocal agreement?
I mean, if there were a contract between MIDC and Otelco,
Right.
that, you will be our exclusive provider on the condition that you build out the
Right.
entire region.
Right.
It seems to me that should be part of the discussion.
Well, perhaps it is.
Yeah.
I'm not privy to
No.
their discussion, and we're not at the table, so,
Yeah, well,
which is one of the reasons Thomaston, there is one of the reasons they wanted to join, is they felt it was better to be at the table than not at the table. And that's another way of looking at it.
have you ever seen an operator / ISP fail on a network once it's built and kind of leave the municipality that sponsored it high and dry? Where the economics just didn't work out as planned.
No, because the funding's there. Well, I'm just trying to think back of all the projects that we did when I was there, and the current projects. No, I can't think of any that. No, the short answer is no. Because typically it's been, you got a grant to build out the infrastructure. You submitted a plan to build out the infrastructure for this amount of money, and you got that amount of money, and they went and did it. So, to have one say, I've got a half built out, I spent half of your money, and I'm pulling out,
Or we operated for a year and our take rates weren't as expected, and so we're going elsewhere?
No, I haven't.
And more often than not, are they partnered up, municipality and operator, when they come to get the grant, or?
Yes, the 35 or so grants that I did before I retired, I have to look back through my list, but there was I don't know whether it was even of ISP partnering with the town, the ISP was the applicant, ISP partnering with the town, and the town was the applicant. I would say more of them was the ISP being the applicant, partnering with the town. And they put a grant application together and came before the Connect Main Authority and were awarded or not. There's the authority has a score for the grant application based on, how many people you're going to serve, cost per drop, what kind of improvement. One of the scores we were using was how many, the SSC used to have broadband tiers, tier 1 through 8 or so. How many tier improvement are you going to do to what they have now to what they're going to get? And most of them got max points on that because they were going to put in fiber, and fiber is provides a lot more. There were a couple of projects early on with the cable company, and they didn't have as big an improvement as a fiber company would, but it was a whole lot better than what they had before. But that was early on. For instance, Tidewater Telecom got a fiber to the home project at some point in their operating area, back when I was and they did, that was fiber, cable, their cable company.
So I think the anxiety that I picked up from just sitting in on the MIDC meeting is that Axion isn't going to wait for any of this. They're just going to move in and offer.
Axiom or Telco?
Okay.
Okay, Axiom's doing this, working, doing
Right.
the study for them, okay.
Right, I'm sorry. No,
Okay, good.
no, the other guys, wrong afternoon, I'm sorry. It's just gonna come in and offer this service without regard to anything, just as if they were time. And scoop the heart out of it. That was what they were fretting over last month when I sat in. And why they wanted to move ahead as fast as they could with the other stuff.
Building study and everything.
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
And they, to your question earlier, they did indicate that all of the info or all of the notices that they've gotten on this, all but said, we're not even interested. So they've got the very definite impression that it's not worth even trying to cooperate because they are not intending to cooperate.
Go ahead.
Was there a cable company before Time Warner Cable in here? Or were they the originals?
No, I don't think they were the original.
AT&T, I think.
I think we
Cable
had.
company,
In this
probably Adelphia.
Yeah,
Delta
Delta was,
was,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then Time Warner, and now.
I think.
They don't bail. They just sell.
Big conglomerate. Okay, so do we know enough to know what share or portion of South Thomaston is underserved?
Well, I think that depends on how you find that.
And that's why I think it's important for us and why I think the study is the first step.
I agree.
Yeah, it's important for us to get that. So I'm willing to do anything to be part of that study.
Well,
And
have
I mean,
we-
we've already communicated intention to do that, and they're not requiring joining to do that, right? And
Just that.
have already contributed the cash or? have
No,
promised?
we haven't got the cash.
Oh, okay, great.
But the town meeting has authorized us to do it, but Terry tells me that we did not vote. We saw, we remembered that we did.
Yeah.
Actually,
Huh? We sort of agreed to.
yeah,
do it,
exactly.
But we
I heard
didn't
you agree.
actually
Yes.
vote to do it,
Agree
According-
to what?
to give them,
To contribute to.
contribute the $5,000 once we get it. At least that's what's your latest information. that-
That's,
I looked, I didn't.
That's
She
what-
says, I don't see that you
I
voted.
don't see that you voted, so I did put it on the agenda for the 10th.
Yeah. But we don't have the cash yet, and now the state is for another month's delay on the AA.
So they've already contracted with, and Axiom has already started that study,
I
right?
don't know that.
Okay, I guess the question would be, if we haven't paid up, are they gonna include South Thomaston or not?
I think so. I think they understand that we couldn't pay until we got the money, and
So Axiom is doing the planning study for the rest of the MIDC towns?
Feasibility.
Ability.
Yeah.
For any of them.
well, anybody who's willing to contribute. They're assessing, Rockland has agreed to contribute 15, Camden 15,000.
Mhm.
Rockport 15, Thomaston 15, and South Thomaston has not agreed, even though we thought it did. 5,000. And I don't know if Alsted or Cushing or any of the other towns have, and they're in the 5,000 too.
Cushing is contributing, I'll double check
Yeah.
later today when I'm there.
How do we verify that we are gonna be included in the study?
Well, that's kind of what, I mean, Walter and Cliff are our representatives to that, so
Yeah,
I
I
guess I
think
would put that on Walter and Cliff.
one question is, have they put it out to RFP, and what does the RFP say, and what does the proposal or the
Wow.
contract say?
That's another concern I have, I've been doing a lot of reading on these ARP funds, and there's a lot in there in terms of bidding and Davis-Bacon requirements. And just because you hand the money over to someone else doesn't mean that you as a town are not responsible that those requirements, bid requirements and Davis-Bacon requirements are followed. So that's a whole other concern that's come up in my mind.
So my action item is to call Matt tomorrow and ask him where this stands and what they're affecting. us.
And we're responsible to make sure that those funds are spent accordingly. So we could be on the hook for the $5,000 if they don't follow the proper bidding procedures and blah, blah, blah. So, but that's a whole other issue.
We just need to verify that we're in.
So the reason I ask is because that's kind of a predicate of another question that I have for Phil, which is, let's say, underserved is, I don't know, what would you say is underserved?
Well, anybody on telephone company's DSL service
Right.
is underserved. Anybody on the cable company service is probably not. Cable service, the FCC and the Connect Main Authority define served, and that the cable company can provide. I think it's down in 25 up, but they're 25 down. It's changing, you think I remember.
But I think a lot of people that don't have those up speeds feel they're underserved.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, if you've got telephone company DSL, you're underserved.
No, I mean, even if you have cable, Cliff, for one, would feel, he does try to do telemedicine from home and stuff. He feels he's underserved because he doesn't have those up speeds. And somebody else came in who does business in Europe or something, and they tried to, send 1,000 documents or pages of something and took them 3.5 days. I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
So that person feels underserved.
Yeah.
And the definition of that's critical because the ARP, the way they've written those is it's ARP eligible if they are underserved, and I think they use 110, 100 up or 100 down, 10 up. I think that was the number they quoted. But it's ridiculously low, which is why the county is very slow and reluctant to get into this process. They don't think the ARP funds are going to be eligible.
But I thought their goal was to do 100 and 100.
That's what their stated goal is.
Yeah.
And which is another reason I question the process of MIDC, because their stated goal is 100 by 100, but ARP is not. It's something significantly less than that. So I don't even think they can use ARP funds to get to where they want to go.
If they're more than the threshold, you don't think that would be eligible? I thought it would be
No.
less than the threshold.
It's only eligible if it's less than the threshold. So if you are going to try to do 100 by 100, that's not eligible
I didn't read it.
if they already have 100 by 10.
See, I thought it went off the starting point. So if you're under some threshold at the starting point, it doesn't matter where you're trying to go. Right?
That's
No,
typically.
no,
how
but
the-
if you are not underserved, if you already meet that threshold, he is not underserved. 100 by 10 is not underserved, therefore counting him as getting money to pay for his is ineligible.
Yeah.
So BSL
I gotta check on
are
that.
the only ones that would be eligible for the funds.
So, I mean, let's just say hypothetically that 35% of South Thomaston is underserved by whatever metric. And Thomaston and then all the other MIDC towns that might join, and let's say 17% of them are underserved. Do you think in your world, at Connect Maine, is it more likely that the bigger group that's gonna serve a broader geographic area, but maybe have a smaller percentage of underserved people is gonna do better with grants, or the smaller geographic area with a higher number of them?
Well, I don't know. One of the metrics we used to use, and it's hard to know what the connectivity authority is going forward. You would think logically that the smaller group with a higher number of underserved rates higher. But they're looking at the total number that you're going to serve with 100 by 100. Again, it depends on how the grant is worded. I'd have to look at it.
They're not that far down the road with those details yet, I would say.
No, well, the connectivity authority hasn't even met yet.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so they need to put some rules together.
So it's hard for you to guess what
Yeah.
they're gonna.
But in the world of just, priorities and broadband build out, I think, the priorities probably are gonna stay somewhat static, what you all used to apply.
Yes. I mean, the Connect Maine Authority said they're going to continue doing what they're doing, and then other than delaying their the next grant round. And it's my understanding that the Connectivity Authority still has to come up with operation rules to operate under, and they're routine technical, which means they don't have to go through the legislature. Which Maine Authority had initially, but in any case, the Connect Maine Authority does have access to the bond funding that they got last year. And whether they'll have access to the high level of federal funding going forward, I don't know. I don't know if that's geared towards the Connectivity Authority or not. And then certainly they'll set, SEC standard for served and unserved is pretty low. Unserved is 25, less than 25, down and 3 up. That's a pretty low number.
And I guess in your experience, the people, the operators who are building out and running these systems, is if they know that they're gonna be getting like a very high take rate from a place like this, that's underserved, and people are excited about the opportunity to have a new kind of service, are they really going to still be, reluctant financially to get into a market like this? Or are there benefits to them?
Well, grant funding is the benefit. I mean, if they haven't built it out already using their own internal funds because of cost benefit analysis, you're just not going to do that grant funding. If the town of South Thomaston could show that, if you fiber the whole town, 100% of the residences, then you can guarantee 50% take rate. They're going to go, okay, well, that's a monthly charge of this amount. This is versus that amount, and but if they get grant funding, it lowers those numbers down. They don't have to have much. If they get grant funding for 50% of the project, they can lower the amount of take rate needed or the amount of income needed by that amount of money.
I guess that goes back to the last question, which is kind of unanswerable.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's gonna depend on what the connectivity authority does, and of course, the feds are gonna make up rules for how they're gonna disperse.
I'm gonna ask a dumb question because I've been thinking about this for a long time and I didn't want to throw us off track. I'm assuming that the fiber is strung on poles.
It can be it's just like electrical wire or
Right.
cable, wire, either on poles or underground.
Well, okay, underground around here. So, as a practical matter, we're talking poles. Can anybody access those poles now? So why is telco such a threat to?
They either own the poles or they have license for the pole. So that's a whole,
So how does MIDC have access to?
well, if they're in the, if they're in
I'm
the
a basic kind of.
yeah, if they're in the municipality right of way, there is some control over that. Still, there's something called make ready work for hanging wires on poles. And Fairpoint, it was Fairpoint for a long time. There's on a utility pole, there's the electrical space, there's a neutral space, there's a telecommunications space, and there's others to it too as well. But Fairpoint used to always say, we want our wires to be at the bottom of the telecommunications space because it's better for maintenance. So if we want to attach below that, you have to pay to move our wires down, so you move your wires up and increase the make ready work. There was complaints at the FCC about that. I don't know how it was resolved. But make ready work is one of the hurdles, because each pole has to be applied for and each pole has to be paid for to do the make ready, and it's.
So apparently that was addressed with new PUC rules.
Yeah.
But they're actually, it's about a process to go through.
Well, what was addressed? You can have 150 different people on the poles?
You can still have 150 different people on the poles, I think. It's just the process to get there is less onerous. Because that was standing in the way.
So
of these projects.
telco and Midcoast Internet could both be on the poles, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the telecommunications space.
So it's
subject to the pole being full.
So the telecommunications space is currently where the cables people are,
Cable.
below the electric and above the telephone company.
Yes, cable company, telephone companies, alarm companies, anybody that has some kind of communications.
Yeah, and that was for poles in the right of ways.
Yeah, there's
poles that aren't in.
Well, Kristen probably knows more about this, how those rules that were made less onerous.
I only know that they were made less onerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that it's still, bureaucratic.
It is, it just adds to the project.
And you hire somebody like Axiom to do the make ready, or whoever is doing your build out would be doing that work. Yeah, I mean, I think practically it means that Hotelco could come in, build out some portion of this region, right? And effectively usurp whatever might be for that area, which would mean.
But not by kicking them off,
Not by
preventing
kicking
them
them
off
off,
the
just
pole, but by taking their customers.
Yeah, economically.
Which are two different methods of blocking.
I've got one of my formless questions, and my ignorance in this area is vast despite my interest. But I was at the last select board meeting when we had a presentation on MIDC and how Hotelco's thrown them for a loop. I was really offended at the idea that Hotelco said, as boldly as possible, we are in it for the profit. We are only going to go to places with enough density to make us rich. So they're going to be the kind of folks that we all love and meet in our they are not gonna be folks who say, we're really there for the customer and we really want, I don't know the right term. We want your output for somebody like Click. We'll be sure, we care about that, even if that's not gonna make us rich immediately. And if I was a customer living in Camden, I would be attracted by a different message, instead of trying to be more like a telco so that maybe we can get some of that base, maybe we should be saying, this is what we're for everybody having access, because we think it matters. And in the long run, there's gonna be more benefit for you, more control for you, because your town will be the owner instead of this gargantuan capitalist monster. And as more opportunities become available, as more stuff is invented and you realize you need more cable or more fiber, your town is more likely to be willing to put in the expense. That's in general. I'm horrified at the thought that we should just let a telco spin us around like this.
Well, I think that's, and because, and then a development corporation point, I mean, they feel like they've been forced to pivot to the high density first, but I think their goal was to not be a stock owner based company. They want to be a government owned utility. And I mean, it's kind of like the Tennessee Valley Authority or the Fox Island Co-op. I mean, it does the electric.
The high density rich folks. Once again, you're saying all those people who have no service to speak of now can, go back to the end of the line like you've always been.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem they're trying to solve, or they're trying to solve.
But that's where I come back to exclusivity does have benefit to a telco. And that is something that the municipalities banded together could offer. Just like a cable TV franchise agreement. You're now franchising to that entity. They know they have no competition. And they get the benefit of municipal funds being able to be contributed to the project as well as whatever, grant money they can get. Should be part of the discussion as far as
Well,
I wouldn't leave it off the table.
Spectrum came in here when they got wind of this and came in to give us a presentation. One of the things that struck me was they gave us a whole, obviously they're running a little scared of this. They gave us a whole list of government-owned utilities broadband that fail throughout the country, and many New England, or have been some sort of potential disaster. So I asked her, I said, so this appears to me like a cherry list. I said, is there not one government-owned utility broadband that has worked in this country? And then she said, oh, I don't know. She said, I'll look into that and get back to you. Well, that was 3 months ago, and I haven't heard from her yet. But I would like to ask you, I mean, clearly there was a number of government-owned utilities that failed.
See that list.
Well, I think I got it somewhere. I might even have it in here, but I mean, has that been your experience on a nationwide basis? Or?
Well, I haven't looked comprehensively nationwide. I mean, there is a group that monitors this stuff. As I said, minitnetworks.org. And they list a lot of quasi-government owned operations. Washington State, my home state, they have what's called public utility districts. And there's a lot of, in the Midwest, there's a lot of what's called co-ops, co-ops. So the PUDs in Washington State, there's probably a dozen of them that have a broadband network that they then contract with an operator, because state law says that a public utility can't provide retail services. And so they just contract with them. It's the public utility district that owns the property. In the Midwest, there's what's called telephone co-ops, and they're they're not real government, but they're a consumer-owned And they've done a lot of broadband operations. So I haven't seen any news stories that specifically, says, oh my God, these are failed.
There's your list.
Oh, Burlington keeps popping up.
But,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think I was sort of tongue in cheek when I said the Tennessee Valley. I think that's what this is all about. I mean, you know, that was created along with Fox, they offer electric. Because the profit world had no interest in going there because there was no profit. I mean, simple as that. So,
Part of my frustration too is I listened to Spectre's and they were disingenuous. I mean, they said they were doing things that they're just absolutely not doing.
And they make no promise to improve up speeds.
no. As a matter of fact, she made an argument that was economically not feasible.
For anybody,
You know,
it's not just, it's not economic for us. It would be non-economic for anybody to do.
the way she put it, it would be sort of like, she didn't say that, I asked her, and she kind of nodded, it would be like putting it in the state. You don't need that.
They're limited by the laws of nature, and fiber is it conforms to different laws, and they can't overcome that.
Yeah. And that's why I think we're seeing Spectrum be the option of choice for like unserved communities as opposed to, you know, some communities that have some regions that are underserved. It's definitely better than nothing, but it's not the ideal.
No, and it's not the future-proof technology. You know, cable company system is called a fiber coax hybrid, and they run fiber to the neighborhood, and then you see boxes out on the phone poles, powered boxes, and all the coax comes out of that. So,
And that was the part specifically that they said that they run fiber from those boxes to individual houses. And any business could get the fiber directly to their business. And I know for a fact that that's just not true.
well, they do advertise that they can run a fiber to the business for a lot more money.
Right. You pay all
But
of
they
those
don't
costs.
advertise fiber to the home
Right.
services. It's the coax hybrid. And, you know, the further they push out, the shorter that, it's all about loop length. The shorter the coax loop, the higher the speeds that you can get through it. So if they push that box further out in the neighborhood, have more boxes out in the neighborhood, you would get more bandwidth over your coax. But again, it's a cost and there's a return to be had.
Okay, we want to move on to the next agenda item and go into executive session to discuss. Or
Did you want to vote on dedicating that $5,000?
no, not tonight. It's not on the agenda. Terry said she put it on the agenda for a meeting. Yeah. I also think now, the more I looked at the ARP rules, we're gonna have to have some sort of contract with them that basically says they will abide by those rules, and if they don't, they're gonna have to pay it back. So I wonder how they're gonna react to that.
I guess I just have one more question directed
Okay.
towards
Sorry.
Bill, which would be, would you, for the typical like feasibility study or planning study that MIDC might be seeking or getting, whatever the work product is, do you think that the South Thomaston portion of that is going to be something that we could use, you know, in other directions? So that it's going to be focused on South Thomaston in a way that we can actually use that data.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, would you expect it to be broken down town by town? And would that data be enough to then be able to go get a grant, let's say on South Thomaston? Or is there any benefit to going and doing our own ability study for South Thomaston in addition to that, or any reason to do that?
Well, I lean towards doing a feasibility study for the Western Kennebec.
I know, well, that's what I was thinking, in that particular one, I mean, if I were looking at that,
Oh, here it is.
this is the Western Kennebec region who we're gonna be working with, but they did a feasibility study for all 6 of their towns. And their report was really broken down town by town.
Yes,
And should, I would think, be able to be used, you know, to apply for grant funding, or at least to better direct a further study.
yeah, I mean, if Axiom is doing the feasibility study, if they do the feasibility study that includes South Thomaston, you're gonna get a report similar to this. I haven't seen an Axiom one in a while, but this one breaks down all towns by each section, by mapping, by gap analysis.
In other words, the data is segregated in such a way that we
Yeah.
can carve it out, so to speak, and use it if we want to go down other roads.
But I think that's something you might wanna ask MIDC, and it kind
So
of,
we'll put that on the Walker's plate.
yeah, that's gonna be, you know, in the scope of work that goes out in the RFP, and that comes back in proposal and contract. Cause I think they could theoretically aggregate it,
And then
and
we
that's
would
not gonna
have
be
no-
super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, they break it out. Percentage of potential subscribers with access to cable modem service. And it's all 6 towns individually laid out. Percentage.
Did they do that study? Did Axiom do that?
No, a company called Casco Bay Advisors. Guy over in Gardner. Really good work. And Axiom does them. I've seen a number of them from Axiom. But it's all generally the same kind of thing. I mean, you look at what's there, what are their hurdles or roadblocks it has to go through, you know, figure out what the expected subscribers would be. I mean, it's all a standard playbook for doing a feasibility study. And the McMahon Authority planning grants and infrastructure grants, and this was planning grant.
Well, that kind of circles back around to, we need to remember the purpose, one of the purposes of this meeting is comment on the bylaws before August 15th. And that kind of circles around to back on one of my comments, and I don't want to get through the meeting and forget the purpose of this meeting, is that I would really like to see the MIDC subject to the main open meeting. And that base data we could get, even if it wasn't in the. For example, that's an example of what led to my comment on that. If we do go into executive session, it seems to me we're gonna have to come back out to sort of finalize our comments, or at least have someone with that. So are we ready to move into the executive session now, or do we even need executive session? I guess
I
that would
think
be.
so. So
Okay,
what we need to do is just talk about what the list is, and why. And I also just want to talk more generally about where this board stands in terms of joining and
okay,
any communications you want to make. I think we should do that.
okay. So I have a technical question. If we go into executive session, I'd like to include Ian and Lynn as our technology committee here, but can Lynn still participate without the public participating?
I can stop the recording.
Well, okay, so the answer is yes.
And can we ensure that no one else joins with this?
Yes, I
thing?
have
Yeah, she's gonna let,
Okay.
okay.
But if I stop YouTube, which I will have to stop YouTube, we won't go back.
So we won't be able to do our action items if we do any in public.
Right.
We gotta figure this out, way to do
The meeting
this.
itself is still public. People could and are here.
And people could come back, but
It's okay if the.
I know it's okay legally, but
Yeah.
it's not, we gotta figure it out. Once we go into executive session, we can't get it back again, and I'm not talking just about this tonight, but
But we could, think you can start a new
You
YouTube
can,
session.
yeah,
It would be-
because Owen used to do that.
Yeah,
It would be,
but if you get two,
right, it's 2 segments.
Yeah.
So we probably should try to do that.
The other option would be to post, I don't know if there's a way to have the link to the Zoom so that people could join that way, once we come back, and have that be broadcast as the YouTube stream once we go in.
I don't know how I get on the.
Yeah.
There was an issue with putting people.
Well, for tonight,
Public
let's just start a second meeting, because we may take some action items when we come back out of session. We may not, but. Oh, is there a motion to,
I'd make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056E to discuss the town's legal rights regarding.
set? All those in favor?
Let's just note for the record who's been invited in. That would
Well,
include
they're
Phil,
a
too.
town committee, so I'd rather have them make a motion to go in themselves.
Also in executive.
Yeah, I think, don't you?
Is this a jointly posted meeting?
Yeah, I believe it was, wasn't it? Oh, I don't know.
It's a select board meeting. It's
Uh,
just-
The select.
You
Okay.
have to invite.
All right. I tried that. Okay. Could have been posted. That's an oversight. Yeah, no problem. Sonia, we are gonna reconvene back again in open session. If you-
that's so.
I don't anticipate much being discussed in that.
I think it might be on YouTube.
When we come back out,
Mhm.
I think Terry's gonna try to do that, so.
All right, well, good luck with that, or I'll just ask you what you did.
Well, there'll be minutes.
Take care.
All those in favor? And we're also inviting in, Lynn Canavan and Just. We're on our technology. Yeah, they did it July 3rd.
Oh, I got 3.